What is an example of pure evil? Child sex trafficking. It literally ruins these innocent children's lives before they can do anything about it. Disgusting. Chris Watts. Colorado father who strangled his 34-year-old pregnant wife. Then killed his 3 and 4-year-old daughters and dumped their bodies in oil tanks. He did this to get rid of obstacles that prevented him from being with his lover. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes and comments. I had no idea there was a Netflix documentary and YouTube videos on this case. I don't think I have the stomach to watch those. I just remember watching the news coverage at the time and feeling sick to my stomach for those poor little girls and their pregnant mother. There's a lot of evil in the world, but it's one of the ones I can't forget. Apparently, lots of women have been sending him love letters to the prison because of how hot he is after he went viral by the Netflix documentary. They are sick in the head too. Some guy in the 80s who worked in a lab injected his infant son with HIV-infected blood so his son would die, a horrible death, and he wouldn't have to pay child support. Edit. 1992. Not 80s. Joseph Fritzl, based in Amstetten, Austria, held his daughter captive for 24 years. During this time he assaulted her, sexually abused and raped her numerous times during her imprisonment inside a concealed area in the cellar of the family home. The abuse resulted in 7 children. 3 remained in captivity with their mother. 1 died shortly after birth and the other 3 raised by him and his wife Rosemary. That one story of those Yakuza boys torturing that one girl. Junko. Something. I'll have to look it up later, but the details are honestly gut-wrenching. Edit. The name is Junko Furuta. Meant no disrespect by not remembering. Just genuinely forgot with all the other stories I've read. Just goes to show you how much fucked up shit is really out there. If I remember the story you're talking about. I don't think they were actually Yakuza. One of them just claimed to be. But yes. They tortured, raped, and eventually murdered a 17-year-old girl, and one of the guy's parents were aware of it. They were actually keeping her hostage in the house. This happened for weeks, months, but no one stepped in. Truly fucking gruesome. Removed. Not only that, but when the women couldn't afford to buy it, they would water it down to make it last longer. So the kids wound up totally undernourished. Take into account that many of these women didn't have access to clean water with which they could make the formula. And you have a whole bunch of sick, hungry babies. The big shots down at Nestle are utter pieces of shit. Lawrence Singleton. What he did to 15-year-old Mary Vincent is one of the most fucked up things I've ever heard. He picked her up as she was hitchhiking. When he pulled over to pee, she got out of the van to tie her shoelaces. He whacked her over the head with a shovel, put her into the back of the van, raped her all night, then cut off both of her arms and threw her off a cliff, 30 ft drop, and drove off. Despite this, she survived. 15-year-old Mary Vincent managed to climb back up the cliff and started walking. Eventually a couple on their honeymoon drove past her and rescued her. This isn't even the tip of the iceberg with Larry Singleton. The podcast My Favorite Murder did a brilliant episode on him. He was a cruel bastard and I'm happy he died of brain cancer. Wait, how do you climb up a cliff if you have no arms? The medical experiments done in concentration camps during World War II. That Sylvia Likens story. I honestly felt like less of a human after reading it. I never thought a Wikipedia article could make me cry so damn hard, but it was like every line just kept getting worse. https://en. Wikipedia. Org Wiki Murder of Sylvia Likens. People who torture animals to make videos and people who get off on that. Crystal Scott, 19 of Kokomo, was a bitch who was arrested in 2020 for distributing animal crushing videos. https://www.kokomotribune.com News. Local newswoman indicted on animal cruelty charges pleads guilty. Article 69522 F1A bar 11 FB 249-37 F8 F46 E15 FC. HTML. What's really bad is the fake animal rescue videos where they hurt the animal and trap it under some rocks and then they turn the camera on and act like they just found the animal and are rescuing it. The murder of Junko Furuta. Sick pieces of shit. They're still roaming free to this day. Search at your own risk. It's absolutely horrific. Ogira's mother allegedly vandalized Furuta's grave, stating that she had ruined her son's life. I can't get over the fact that I read this. Ogira raped and tortured that girl for over a month until she died. Nanjing Massacre, aka the Rape of Nanjing. One of the witnesses, a reverend, estimated that there were 1,000 rapes every night. Tens of thousands of people were murdered. Absolutely horrible. You can read more about it here. https://en.m. Wikipedia. Org Wiki Nanjing Massacre. But, yep, it's bad. The people who pressured a 14-year-old Japanese teen to kill herself on stream. Rather than an example. I've always thought that evil was knowing something was very wrong but doing it anyway. Removed. It might not get you any help, but it may help end the business practice if you file a complaint with your state tag's consumer protection section. Removed. If you're talking about Lavella Peaches, I am pretty sure that I've read about it and it turned out she never really had custody over her child, so she was never in real danger. But yes, it was definitely disgusting how she talked about her. Plus she has done other awful things like stalking Charlie D'Amelio and saying she will send someone to rape her. Skinning animals alive. People who eat meat and don't eat meat. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that this right here is fucked up. John Venables and Robert Thompson. When they were 10, they abducted 2-year-old James Bulger from a shopping center. Took him to some railway tracks. Tortured and abused him for hours, then left his body to get cut in half by an oncoming train. Edit. Thank you kind Redditors for the awards. It's a sad topic but important to make young children aware of the dangers they can face. Even in other children. This was my comment but my brain had blocked out that poor boy's name. The toy box killer. Truly the sickest, most horrifyingly disgusting example of humanity. The monologue, which you can find through a Google search, that he would play for his new victims is probably the scariest thing on earth. Child molestation and severe physical torture used solely for emotional pleasure. Torturing helpless animals, children, and or the elderly. There is a special place in hell for these kinds of people. Taking advantage of the innocent and weak, i.e. children and animals, as well as taking advantage of the elderly. I'm looking at all those damn military charities. For one. The scary amount of women who've gone in to have IVF use a sperm donor and the doctor uses their own sample instead of the chosen provided one. I remember seeing an article about a doctor who had like 50 plus kids from doing this. Which, considering how expensive IVF and fertility treatments are, I really think punishment for that kind of thing should be incredibly heavy-handed. He was found out. They had to track the 50 kids so they didn't accidentally incest. The proximity of the children was high and the probability apparently increases enough to give thought to prevention of crossing paths. Murder of Kellyanne Bates. I won't go into the details as it is very gruesome. But know that some consider her to be the most tortured victim. Her boyfriend tortured her over a period of 4+ weeks. https://en.m. Wikipedia. Org Wiki Murder of Kellyanne Bates. Warning, not for the faint of heart. Wow, that's horrific. That poor girl. I'm a student in social anthropology and one of my teachers studies sexual violence on men in war times, in particular during the breakup of Yugoslavia. Here is one small example of the kind of shit she saw. A young boy, like 12 or 13, was at home with his 2 parents when a bunch of armed soldiers broke in. They threatened the mother with a gun and made a proposition to the kid. Sodomize your father and we will let your parents live. To save his mom and dad, the young boy complied. But when he had finished raping his own father, the soldiers killed both of his parents. Gave him a bunch of drugs, a gun and made him a child soldier fighting for their side. I always thought if they didn't commit the act their parents would die. I never even thought it knew that even complying with the demands leads to the same outcome. Those poor children. No wonder drugs become something they would rely on. This is a fucked up world. Animal cruelty. This is what I came here to say. Also cruelty to children and the elderly. Abusing vulnerable, defenseless beings is pure evil. Cartels. Lying in bed for 20 years. Pretending you're too ill to get a job. Making your daughter work 3 jobs to keep you in tobacco and cabbage water. Then jumping out of bed like Fred Astaire when your grandson wins a factory visit. making people spend hundreds to thousands a month so they can get their, or their children's, insulin to stay alive for no fucking reason other than greed. It's disgusting, and the fact that it just stays that way takes the wind out of my hope for humanity sometimes. Seriously, fuck them. Jeffrey Dahmer. He got 14 life sentences if I recall. In prison he was brutally murdered with dumbbells. So naturally, he now has 13 left to go. I'll see myself out. Listening to Salad Days and Panzermensch while you kill your old friends and classmates with an R15. And faking mental illness after arrest. If I'm correct, it's the guy that's in the video of faking insanity on YouTube. Using the source of drinking water of a whole town for some country club in the midst of the biggest drought ever. Nestle takes this to a whole nother degree. Ah, fuck Nestle. Anyone who kills pizza delivery drivers. So not only are you a scumbag for killing someone, you're literally killing a minimum wage worker who delivers happiness and doesn't have more than $50 on themselves at any given time. You deserve to be crammed into the cargo hold of a rocket going to the sun. It's right up there with killing children and other defenseless people. A special circle of hell exists just for them. I had to look this up and didn't even know that pizza delivery drivers have one of the highest fatality rates for occupations. At least in the US. In a similar sense, I can see why there are a lot of reports of DoorDash etc. drivers rejecting food delivery requests if the area is known to have a high amount of robberies, murders. Richard Ramirez. People who knowingly spread STDs and other viruses. Nestle going into poor African countries and giving away free formula samples to new mothers until they stop producing their own milk. Buying the manufacturing license to a life-saving drug just to spike the price by 5,000%. Unit 731. Edit. The Japanese occupation of Nanjing. Nothing against the Japanese today. But dear Lord, were their ancestors absolute demons when it came to war. The only issue I have with Japan is that their government refuses to teach what happened during their imperial rule and deny a lot of it to this day. I was bullied by a Japanese girl at my high school for being Korean by telling me how much better she was than me and such, since she was Japanese and I was Korean, and she told me Koreans deserved what Japan did to them. Also, she was a senior when I was a freshman, so everyone just found it funny. Gertrude Banaszewski, who tortured a teenager that she was meant to be looking after for 3 months before killing her. Family annihilators. Child sex trafficking. Pastor Mac Charles Andrews Jr. of Alabama, who raped a 9-year-old girl on top of her father's grave among other kids in front of his own children, whom he taught to believe that was normal. And he threatened his child victims with promises that he would sick demons on them. He was sentenced to 15 years of prison and released after 5. What is an example of pure evil? A society which allows this. I'd never heard of this, so I googled. He was released early just this past May 2021 after serving only 5 of the 15-year sentence. Horrifying. Charging whistleblowers under the Espionage Act of 1917. Most whistleblowers contact legitimate outlets to voice concerns about immoral shit that happens daily within government agencies or military services. The Espionage Act clause that's invoked literally treats them as if they are turncoats who are fighting against the US and on the side of a specific adversary. None of that is the case. These are people who want to help the system do honorable conduct. They are the martyr saints of our system. They are heroes. And we treat them like corrupt scum. This is evil. The Catholic Church protecting and relocating priests who have molested children. Rape. Rich corporations destroying the planet and blaming us for not recycling. Killing for fun. The dude from Lost Prophets. Ton can't even had I fuckeds as his password. I don't believe in mob justice, but I hope to Christ he's having a bad time in prison one way or another. Nathan Larson. Self-proclaimed pedophile who admitted he'd rape his own daughter once she became a teenager. Ran a whole forum website for pedocincels, general misogynists. Advocated for the legalization of child marriages. Incest. CP. Repealing the 19th Amendment. Etc. Honestly, the list goes on. Threatened to kill President Obama and only got 14 months in prison. Attempted to run for Congress to put his ideas into action. Was arrested fairly recently for supposedly kidnapping a 12-year-old girl. One of the most depraved and pathetic excuses of a human I've ever seen. He has a daughter because he raped his spouse, who later committed suicide. Luckily, he does not have custody of the poor kid. Jared from Subway. This Ohio man who raped his girlfriend's 6-month-old baby to death and then tried to get out of the death penalty because he wasn't trying to kill the 6-month-old baby. Just rape her. https://www. USATOday.com Story News Nation. The 1st of May 2013. Ohio rape baby /2,126,323. Evil incarnate. Nestle gave free samples of baby formula to impoverished African families. They used them for a few weeks until it was used up. But by then they stopped producing milk because they had only used the formula. Now their babies either died or they had to spend what was to them massive amounts of money on more formula. This led to lots of dead or malnourished babies. Corporate death penalty for Nestle. Dissolve the company, seize the assets and throw everyone who was behind this scheme in prison for a few decades. Reinhard Heydrich and Joseph Mengele. The most fucked up thing I think I've seen from Mengele is his adopted Jewish children. He would choose a young Jewish child from the lines as they came into the camp. For a few days, he'd give the kid candy, bring them around the camp, and give them special treatment. Then, when he tired of them, he would personally escort them to the gas chambers, or begin torturing them himself in this medical laboratories. Sea of Nestle. https://www. Zmeshants.com Science Nestle Company pollution children. Gangs raping a woman, taping the crime and then posting it on internet. Anyone who abuses kids, animals or the elderly, I hope there is a special place in Hades for them. Televangelism. Generally all of them for taking from the poor to rich themselves in the name of God. Especially those who are preaching seed faith, telling people to send them money instead of spending it on medical procedures or investing it. On top of this blatant scam, they don't even have to pay taxes for it. For me as a non-American, it is mind-blowing that this is still a thing in 2021 and that nobody is really doing anything to stop it. Men who commit honor killings. Special place in hell for these people. Allowing your husband to rape your 3 children because you are that in love with him. Ugh. My aunt disgusts me. Have you contacted police or something? Purposefully hurting others who are defenseless. i.e., children, seniors, animals. Joseph Mengele was one of the worst humans in history. When the Exxon execs decided to bury their extensive climate change research, they jeopardized the entire planet so they could keep profiting. Politicians, government officials stealing government funds intended for the pandemic response and healthcare. Encouraging people to open up and be vulnerable with you. Then using the info they gave to try to destroy them emotionally and fight dirty in arguments. This is the most common form of abuse in relationships. Albert Fish. My aunt, a devout Southern Baptist, had my grandfather sign over everything to her while he had severe Alzheimer's. She then removed him from the hospital and allowed him to die slowly in her home from colon and prostate cancer. This crushed my mother, who was flying across the country weekly to care for him and his affairs. That same aunt attacked my mother at the funeral. Fuck you, Gene. I hope it's hot in hell.